Hello and happy October, everybody. Oh god, I said to myself last night that I was going to record this, and then I said, okay, I'll do it in the morning, and then I got up this morning, I'm just like, I don't want to, but I said, no, Ashley, get out of bed and do this damn video. Recap videos are the hardest part of doing my marathon, which is why the first couple times I didn't do it, but I'm trying. I'm getting better at it each year. So in these videos, I'm going to recap and give you brief reviews on all the films that I'm watching during my 31 Days of Halloween movie challenge. Some call it 31 Days of October, some call it 31 Days of Horror, some call it 31 Nights of Horror. It really all depends on your preference. I don't say 31 Days of Horror because I don't exclusively watch horror films during the month of October. I watch anything that I feel fits into the Halloween theme. So that can be horror, that can be thriller, that can be dark fantasy, that can be kiddies horror films, you know, like Don't Look Under the Bed, stuff like that. Or sometimes it can be like obscure sci-fi dark stuff, like anything that I just feel fits, I watch it. So today I'm recapping films 1 to 30. I'll briefly go into each of them, give you a little bit of a review. I try to keep my reviews brief, but we'll see how we go. This might end up longer than I intended. If so, I apologize. But anyway, let's start this video. Film number 1 is The Addams Family, a 1991 American supernatural black comedy directed by Barry Sonnenfeld in his screen debut and written by Caroline Thompson and Larry Wilson, based on the characters from the cartoon created by cartoonist Charles Addams and the 1964 TV series. The film focuses on a bizarre, macabre, aristocratic family who reconnects with who they believe to be a long-lost relative, Gomez's brother Fester Addams, who is actually the adopted son of a con artist intending to swindle the Addams clan out of their vast wealth and fortune. You can't go wrong with this film. Costumes, performance, writing, which is so witty and ingenious. Even the score, it's all on point, including lighting techniques. And despite everyone seeing this family as eccentric and as freaks, they are probably more functional and kind and giving than most people in the world. I would even call Gomez and Morticia relationship goals. Passionately in love, devoted and fiercely loyal to each other and their family, and completely in sync with their partner's wants and needs. I love the subject of family in this movie. It's more inclusive and open-minded than a lot of families today, and that's saying something. The Addams Family is a brilliant gothic masterpiece, which is why I revisit it every year. Number 2, naturally, is Addams Family Values, a 1993 American supernatural black comedy film directed by Barry Sonnenfeld and written by Paul Rudnick. It's a sequel to 1991's The Addams Family and follows a serial killer who marries Uncle Fester, intending to murder him for his inheritance, while teenagers Wednesday and Pugsley are sent to summer camp. Sequels are usually never better or even as good as the original, but Addams Family Values is just as fun and brilliantly entertaining as the first, and in some ways even more so. The addition of Debbie the Black Widow was genius and works with the style of the film perfectly. Joan Cusack fits into the cast so well and gives a stellar performance as Debbie, so good it's sad to see her die. I could watch these actors play these roles forever. I wish we had gotten more of them. The sequel is more fun, more adventurous, and has even more quotable dialogue than the first film, which is why, again, I revisit it every year. Number 3 is Enigma, a 1987 Italian horror film directed by Lucio Fulci from a screenplay and story by Fulci and Giorgio Mariuso. In it, the spirit of a comatose teenage girl possesses the body of a newcomer to her girls' boarding school to enact bloody revenge against the elitist lingerie-clad co-eds responsible for her condition. Well, that was certainly an experience. A couple of moments creeped me out simply due to the ick factor, but that aside, I wasn't all that intrigued by this film. I've seen many films about a victim of bullying getting their revenge, and I do love those kinds of storylines, call it living vicariously, but this just felt too out of the box. I can get on board with the concept of the soul of the spirit of a comatose victim possessing someone or even haunting people. We've seen something along those lines in An American Haunting and other films, but this went beyond that and into a spirit developing magical powers and their possessed victim being able to tap into them, and while that sounds not so bad, seeing it in action is a whole other story. If it was characters just being scared to death, that's one thing, or if it was just Kathy going around murdering people using Ava's hands to do that would suffice, but it just got a little weird. Also, this is a school where students are having sex with teachers and doctors and everyone knows it and no one cares. The guys are legit sexual predators. I wasn't sold on the revenge story either because for the most part, most of the victims don't know who is doing this or why. So that sense of them getting to realize how badly they fucked up and justice is being served doesn't exist for most of the deaths. For most of this film, majority of these characters have no remorse for what they did or the fact it resulted in someone ending up in a coma. So it had some interesting stuff, but the way it all came together was just too confusing. Number 4 is Agathas Gate, a 2019 horror mystery film directed and written by Harley Wallen. In it, a psychic reader and medium are invited to a party, but something goes very wrong and something comes over from the other side to haunt the people from the party. They must solve the mystery before it's too late. Agathas will not be easy to stop. I could try to be nice, but this is a really bad film. To its credit, the film quality is good, and I do actually appreciate its use of subtle techniques to create that out of the corner of your eye effect. If anything, I think it should have utilized that technique far more. The performance and storyline are the worst aspects for me. The story is so disjointed and extremely hard to follow. It cuts between characters in moments that make no sense, and you wonder, where does this fit in? Now, I'm not saying the actors are bad. I can see there's some talent here, but the director should have given better instructions. The entire film just feels like this person delivering a line and this person delivering a line. There's no flow to the dialogue. It doesn't feel like a genuine conversation is happening, and half of what is said is just weak writing at best. I couldn't get mad at this film. I was just far too bored by the entire film. It thinks it has a concept, but it never fleshes it out or really appears to even know where it wants to go with this story. Everything is a stretch. People versed in the paranormal know what demon they're dealing with just because some homes got trashed. That's Supernatural 101, guys, not indicative of one specific entity. Then a character who is a patient in a hospital dies, and the staff scream and lose their minds. You guys are nurses in a hospital. People die in hospitals. Nurses would not be this hysterical. On top of that, security's right there unusually fast declaring it a homicide. Why? He says apparent homicide. Where do we get that idea? She's laying there dead with her eyes open with no external wounds or injuries. She could have had a heart attack or any number of things. Yes, she was murdered by a demon, but nothing about her state indicates homicide. So this entire scene was unrealistic and stupid. Even the police getting involved makes no damn sense, and then it just abruptly ends out of nowhere. This ended up being my first flaming jack-o'-lantern of the season, which I give to films that I think are really bad, all because of its delivery and piss-poor storytelling. Number 5 is All Hallows Eve, a 2013 American horror anthology film directed and written by Damien Leone in his first feature film debut. The film incorporates scenes from 2 of Leone's earlier shorts, The Ninth Circle and Terrifier, and follows a babysitter who finds a VHS tape which features various sinister murders performed by a psychotic clown. This is one of the better horror films I've seen, enough to make me return to it each year. It is absolutely perfect for Halloween and features what I consider to be the best horror clown ever to be introduced in a movie. Sadistic, demonic, silent, and deadly. I think this is a brilliant way for Damien Leone to incorporate all his short films into one full-length film, and it works perfectly. He has created the perfect horror villain, and for an independent film, it is better than most big-budget ones in terms of quality. The effects are good and pretty effective, and the acting is surprisingly good and includes a well-thought-out plot. I also should mention how perfect the score is. I haven't appreciated it enough in the past, but it's so good. Katie Maguire is an absolute scene stealer in this film, and I mean that in the best possible way, which is why, again, I go back to this film every year. Number 6 is Terrifier, a 2016 American horror film written and directed by Damien Leone, based on Leone's short film of the same name, which was featured in his anthology All Hallows Eve. In it, a maniacal clown terrorizes 3 young women on Halloween night, and everyone stands in his way. This never disappoints me. What I love about Art is that he doesn't fit into a stereotypical maniac role. Aspects of him make him appear supernatural, while others make him appear human, and the combination of the two is incredibly unnerving. There's just so much to say about this movie, so I suggest checking out my full-length review of the film that I already have on my channel from a couple years ago. Oh, and I cannot wait for the sequel, Terrifier 2, to come out. Number 7, The Ascent, a 2019 horror thriller film directed and written by Perry Reginald Teo. In it, after a series of disturbing supernatural events in his home, Joel, a young single father, comes to suspect his young son may be possessed. The film almost has a fresh take on possession films, but it doesn't take it all the way. I like how the film approaches the subject by looking at mental health versus paranormal phenomena. I like this angle, but much of it is predictable. The reveal was never shocking to me because the therapist never acted how a therapist would. For a schizophrenic, one of the common triggers of an episode is stress, and this therapist kept using judgmental tones, putting pressure on our lead, and using very aggressive and judgmental body language. Everything that a therapist would avoid in a patient of this nature, as though she wasn't trying to help but actually set him off. Though I am glad there was a reason for her character being so out of character, it now makes sense. Otherwise, I'd say they didn't write her accurately, but in context, they did. The demon is disturbing, stays away from what we think demons look like, and goes for something that's very TV series Angel meets Silent Hill, and I kind of dig it. The sound effects were indeed creepy because they made me think of spiders, but the layered voices was getting a bit annoying. I didn't enjoy the priest because he is the most pretentious priest I've come across. Really loves the sound of his own voice. It's almost way too convenient that the good guys happen to be at the right place at the right time. Overall, I like where it was going, just didn't quite stick the landing. Number 8, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, a 1978 parody comedy horror film directed by John DeBello and written by John DeBello, Costa Dillon, and Stephen Peace, and follows a group of scientists who band together to save the world from mutated killer tomatoes. Admittedly, I was far too tired and out of it to fully take in everything that happened, and I regret that, but I can see plenty there that I was entertained by that will prompt me to give it another watch. Also, no one told me it would involve random musical numbers. That was very unexpected, and yet very catchy and entertaining. I was honestly expecting giant-sized tomatoes with razor-sharp teeth, not this tiny grocery store tomatoes rolling around on their own and somehow killing people in ways I'm not entirely sure of. This film is so weird and bizarre, and I can totally see how it's supposed to be movies and then some. It's incredibly well done, and I really enjoyed what I was able to process. It's goofy and absurd, but very well executed, and everyone really commits to their performances, and I love that. But we'll see what happens on a rewatch where I'm paying better attention. Number 9, Return of the Killer Tomatoes, a 1988 American parody comedy horror film directed by John DeBello and written by DeBello, Costa Dillon, and Stephen Peace, is the first sequel to the 1978 film Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and is set 10 years after the events of the first film, where in it crazy old Professor Gangrene has developed a way to make tomatoes look human for a second invasion. Now, I'm thinking if I was paying more attention, I'd have loved the first film more because I love the sequel. Honest to goodness, I was engrossed the entire film and was rolling on the floor laughing at most of it. It's intelligent, whimsical, breaks the fourth wall, and the product placement was hilarious. It's films poking fun at films and the ones that are sellouts. George Clooney should have done more comedy-based films because he is hilarious. Also, doesn't hurt Anthony Starkey is in this, and he appeared in an episode of Charmed, season 4 episode Music to My Ears to be specific. So that was an extra kick for me. There's nothing more entertaining than a parody that goes in fully loaded, knowing what it is and how to say it loud and proud. So no matter how dumb it seems, it's dumb on purpose and with a purpose. So for me, I'd watch this again for sure. Number 10, Killer Tomatoes Strike Back, a 1990 American comedy film directed by John DeBello and written by DeBello, Constantine Dillon, and Rick Rockwell. It's the third in the Killer Tomatoes film series and the sequel to Return of the Killer Tomatoes. In it, Professor Gangrene attempts to brainwash the world, and a police assistant and a tomatologist team up to stop him. It's not terrible, but it was a marginal step down from the first two. I wasn't nearly as entertained by this as I was the first two. It does parody some classic films, and I enjoyed that. Psycho, The Godfather, and of course the Friday the 13th references were priceless. Especially having this Jason-esque character being terrified of killer tomatoes and defeated by him. That I got a kick out of. I didn't actually enjoy them giving the tomatoes faces. The previous films made a lot more sense without the faces. In this version, it just looked too weird and somehow wasn't as funny. Lead characters weren't that interesting either, but I love the return of FT. He's cute, so I enjoyed him being included. Overall, not terrible, but not one I'd feel like I'd want to rewatch outside of a series marathon. At number 11 is Killer Tomatoes Eat France, a 1991 American comedy film directed by John DeBello and written by DeBello, Constantine Dillon, and Stephen Peace. It's the fourth film in the Killer Tomatoes series and a sequel to Killer Tomatoes Strike Back. In it, after escaping from jail, Professor Gangrene plots to take over France and eventually the world by having his hapless assistant impersonate Louis XVII. I was barely paying attention to this one. It was definitely my least favourite. The tomatoes now have more bizarre demonic faces and can now speak English. It just felt like it was getting a bit too out of hand for my liking and didn't seem to have the humour of the first two, which was a shame. At least the films are consistent by keeping the villain the same, and bringing back FT also gives it a sense of continuity, so props to them for that. At number 12 is Bakurao, Portuguese for Nightjar, a 2019 weird western horror film written and directed by Kleber Mendonça Filho and Juliano Dornelles. It revolves around Bakurao, a fictional small town in the Brazilian Sertão, which is beset by strange happenings following the death of its matriarch at the age of 94. In all honesty, much like an A24 film, one can't slap a genre on this. While I feel it definitely highlights socio-political concerns in Brazil in a very daring and unique way, it still has me scratching my head and doesn't answer much. But perhaps that's the point. On the subject of things like colonialism, there are no clear-cut answers. Why does anyone invade someone else's territory? Why does anyone participate in genocide? It's a part of every culture, and I think this film is really just trying to address that this is still happening today. These are not things that only exist in the past. On top of that, it is depicting the will of the people and how strong it can be and how community and its roots run deep, and it means they can withstand and fight against anything you throw at them. They are stronger and more unified than any government. After all, as it goes, it's a government that should be scared of its people. If you're willing to accept there are going to be elements you may never understand, then I highly recommend giving this film a look. Don't know what the death of the village's matriarch had to do with anything though, it seemed kind of irrelevant. Number 13, Behind You, a 2020 American horror film written and directed by Andrew Meacham and Matthew Whedon. In it, two young sisters find that all the mirrors in their estranged aunt's house are covered or hidden. When one of them happens upon a mirror in the basement, she unknowingly releases a malicious demon. It's not a terrible film, it's just relatively bland. The only thing in it that felt original was the clever use of anaphylaxis. Outside of that, so much of the story and character dynamics are things I've seen in millions of other films. It's well made, no doubt, good cinematography and solid performances. There's just nothing new or fresh that this film brings to the table. I could throw a stone and hit 50 other films just like it, and that just made it dull, unfortunately. Number 14, Below, a 2002 submarine horror film directed by David Toy and written by Toy, Darren Aronofsky, and Lucas Sussman. The film tells the story of a United States Navy submarine that experiences a series of supernatural events while on patrol in the Atlantic Ocean in 1943. Suspense, crime, mystery, thriller, supernatural, period, war. This film is everything and does a brilliant job at uniting all those elements into one cohesive story. It's possible I've seen this before and don't remember because parts of this felt familiar, but I still very much enjoyed it. There was a journey and a story to unfold and plots and layers to discover. It's not like the ending is a shock or surprise, but it's the how we get there that makes it so enjoyable. It's watching it all unravel. It's watching how the characters are written and performed, each with fantastic depth to them, allowing us to witness the full range of their mental states and how those mental states evolve or deteriorate throughout the film. Highly enjoyed, would definitely recommend. Number 15 is Belzebuth, a 2017 Mexican horror film directed by Emilio Portes and written by Portes and Luis Carlos Fuentes. In it, after losing his family in an extremely tragic way, Detective Ritter must investigate a massacre at a school perpetrated by a student. What seemed like a pretty clear case becomes much denser when a priest of the Vatican appears with another point of view. The first 5 minutes are hard to stomach and brought me to tears. You can see it coming, and that actually makes it worse because what you're seeing goes against all natural impulse and you just have to sit there and take it. You think that's it, but nope, we're staying on that path for the next half hour, even though the next few brutal scenes are easier to swallow. As the storyline unfolds, the film becomes much easier to digest and more intriguing to follow. I think this film takes the subjects of possession, the coming of the next messiah, and iconic religious storylines that we've seen time and time again in films and does something a bit different with it. It doesn't just give you birds falling from the sky and water turning to blood. It gives you the most accurate depiction of evil and darkness, and it works. It doesn't rely on things that are traditionally Christian. It actually almost stays away from that and goes back further than that to bring us something different. I think this film is much more than a cliche battle of good versus evil. It's really a battle for humanity, and it's human versus inhuman, and the showing us the levels of depravity evil can reach, and how to an extent you have to match those to defeat it. You have to know your enemy to defeat him. I actually thought this was brilliantly done, even though the ending could have maybe been a little clearer for my liking. I did also like this idea of the Vatican really coming into the 21st century and relying on science and scientific evidence to confirm the existence of the paranormal. That was a nice touch, and hats off to another solid performance from Tobin Bell. Number 16, Betsy Palmer, a Scream Queen legend, a 2006 American biography directed by Shane Ma. Betsy Palmer does a one-on-one sit-down interview. During this hour-long conversation, she talks about her roles on Broadway and on television, starring in motion pictures like Mr. Roberts with Henry Fonda and Jack Lemmon, Queen Bee with Jane Fonda, Friday the 13th, and her at the time latest motion picture, Bell Witch the movie. I really did enjoy this biography piece. It was fascinating hearing about her life and career, and naturally my favorite part was when she talks about the backstory she created for Pamela Voorhees in order to play her character better. It was so in-depth and fascinating. I understand this was filmed in a way designed to feel like a casual conversation with the viewer, but the setting for it made it feel less intimate and more stage, which made the vibe feel off. But it was great getting to learn so much about this amazing woman who truly comes off as just a lovely, kind and warm individual. Number 17 is Bulbulaia, translated to Maze, is a 2007 Indian Hindi language comedy horror film directed by Priya Darshan from a screenplay by Naresh Boyer. It's a remake of the 1993 film, that's title I will put here because I ain't even going to try to pronounce that. In it, an NRI and his wife decide to stay in his ancestral home, paying no heed to the warnings of ghosts. Soon inexplicable occurrences cause him to call a psychiatrist to help solve the mystery. Wow, I had no idea what to expect in an Indian comedy horror film, but I was not disappointed. I wouldn't say it's funny or scary, but it deals with real issues and concepts, and for a while appears to be a supernatural film in nature, but depicts them in a relatively light manner. I love that this film is depicting how people so deeply fixated on their beliefs and superstitions are ruled by them, to the point they will point the finger at anything and declare it paranormal, because it's easier than asking questions or looking for real answers, and logical conclusions are not welcome. But at the same time, it shows us how people who push away their culture and beliefs almost have a complete disregard and disrespect for their origins and importance to their families and culture. At the end of the day, the film is about a woman who is battling dissociative identity disorder that to the superstitious appears as a haunting. I love the psychiatrist played by Akshay Kumar. He plays up being the fool, but he is incredibly wise and highly intelligent. He acts a fool so he can better observe everyone in their natural state, and through this is able to quickly deduce what is actually going on and work to stop it. I also appreciate how he is not a skeptic, but he knows how to balance science and beliefs in the paranormal, and is good friends with a priest who is experienced equally in psychology. So they have an understanding of each other and can work together, and it shows the two concepts are not mutually exclusive and can coincide. Vidya Balan gives an amazing performance as Avni. She really was able to embody two completely different characters. While I love the story using beliefs and spiritual practices to help Avni confront her disorder and in turn become aware of her altar, I did not like this film declaring her cured at the end. There is no cure for dissociative identity disorder. You can treat it, you can learn what triggers it and how to manage it and live with it, but there is no known cure for the condition. So while I could get on board with the idea of them going to all these lengths to allow the self to become aware of the altar and allow the self to regain control, the idea of tricking the altar into fulfilling a purpose and then with a little hypnosis the person is completely cured bugged me. Nevertheless, stunning set, beautiful costumes, amazing songs, dancing. Really wasn't expecting a musical, but it was amazing. Number 18, Black Death, a 2010 German-British action horror film directed by Christopher Smith and written by Dario Poloni and Smith. Set during the time of the first outbreak of the bubonic plague in England, a young monk is given the task of learning the truth about reports of people being brought back to life in a small village. The film really dives into the mindset of the period, those who are blinded by faith or find religion and the laws of religion to be absolute. Men of God see God and the devil around every corner and in every action, and at the end of the day are forced to confront the world as it is and then live with the consequences of their actions. The men who are rooted in their faith find it easier to make peace with things, while the one questioning it loses himself and falls down a dark path, unable to come to terms with reality, but further diving into the world of gods and devils and trying to look for a physical devil, something to hurt and hunt and defeat, because it's easier than to live or confront his own guilt and his own inner demons. The time period is perfect to tackle these issues, and the sad reality is it also shows us how, in hundreds of years, not much has changed. People still would rather put the blame or seek answers from religion than seeing the world as it is, and people would rather blame an unseen enemy than ever look within themselves. Sometimes there is no greater power at work. Sometimes we are just humans and have to accept consequences for our own actions. And yes, Sean Bean dies in this. Are you even surprised? Number 19, The Blood on Satan's Claw, also known as Satan's Skin, is a 1971 British horror film directed by Piers Haggard and written by Robert Wayne Simmons and Haggard. It is set in early 18th century England and tells the story of a village taken over by demonic possession. It's a pretty straightforward film, no room for interpretation or misunderstanding. It looks at the old world and how beliefs and superstitions were considered such an affront to society that they became a taboo subject, and it was better to be ignored. But for those who don't ignore it, it goes two ways. Old religions are bad and to be eradicated, and at the end of the day, all will be revealed and only Christianity and righteousness will prevail. Old story, but a good story and well executed, certainly has some uncomfortable moments that line up well with real world occurrences. Number 20, Bloody Birthday, a 1981 American slasher film directed by Ed Hunt and written by Hunt and Barry Pearson. Its plot follows a group of 3 children born on the same day during an eclipse who begin committing murders on their 10th birthday. I got a kick out of this. I really feel it takes inspiration from the original Village of the Damned, seeing as how this is centered around 3 children born at the same time on the same day who all end up psychopaths. I even have to admit I like the explanation. It's a little out there to bring astronomy and astrology into the mix, but at least it's a fairly original concept, and if you think about it, it actually works. It's a brief yet clear explanation. If our moods and personalities are tied to planets and planetary movement, and an eclipse blocking out planets that contribute to certain emotions is blocked, as bizarre as that is, I'm throwing away the receipt because I'm buying it. Murderous children is always a fun storyline. It's creepy because they're so good at being psychotic, and they get away with it because adults are too stupid to believe a child is capable of such things. These children all deserve awards for their performances. They had incredible levels and layers and were able to shift personas on a dime. It was scary and believable to the point I think even as adults these actors need to be evaluated. Number 21, Bones, a 2001 American horror film directed by Ernest Dickerson and written by Adam Simon and Tim Metcalf. In it, over 20 years after his death by a gunshot, Jimmy Bones comes back as a ghost to wreak revenge on those who killed him and to clean up his neighborhood. I honestly didn't hate this. I think the fact that it pays tribute to blaxploitation films gave it a nice flair and unique style, though it being juxtaposed to the modern horror style and influences and other aspects of the film do make it feel like 2 completely different films happening on the screen, and they do conflict often. I think it's a great touch including Pam Grier given the influences. This film is 100% representative of horror films in the early 2000s. It looks and feels exactly like the year it comes from. This isn't that different to Halloween Resurrection, and that one threw and bust a rhyme, so why not have a horror film set in the hood starring Snoop Dogg? It's got master pimp vibes, revenge, family secrets, haunting psychics, even aspects of it reminded me of House on Haunted Hill, specifically the 1999 remake. So again, it's a representation of its time. I mean, it's not scary, but it's not horrendous. It actually has a lot of personality and an entertaining plot. Number 22, Bram Stoker's Shadow Builder, or just Shadow Builder, is a 1998 film directed by Jamie Dixon and written by Michael Stokes, based on the story of The Shadow Builder by Bram Stoker. In it, a demon is summoned to take the soul of a young boy who has the potential to become a saint. By doing this, he will open a doorway to hell and destroy the world. You couldn't get more 90s if you tried. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but everything in this story is so cookie cutter. Evil demon needing to sacrifice some special child in order to be free, man of faith who lost his way redeems himself in the final act. It's all so generic that it's boring, especially because this doesn't bring anything new to those storylines. The demon on top of that was hilarious. He's not scary or menacing at all. The dialogue makes him sound like a really up himself and pretentious demon. The voice is like something used for a villain in an animated film, and it's a good thing the character is shot in darkness most of the time, because when we do get glimpses at what he looks like, it's hilarious. The face is like an Oni mask made and sold at Party City. Number 23, The Cabinet of Dr. Kaligari, also known as Das Cabinet des Dr. Kaligari, a 1920 German silent horror film directed by Robert Wayne and written by Karl Mayer and Hans Janowitz. It tells the story of an insane hypnotist who uses a somnambulist or a sleepwalker to commit murders. Seriously, just say sleepwalker. Silent films are such a treat and absolutely love the sets in this film. Hand painted and sculpted, it made the film feel otherworldly, almost like watching an animated film even though it isn't one. It's fun seeing even silent films in the 20s had plot twists, and I admit I didn't see this one coming. A fascinating watch and an enjoyable piece. Highly recommend this one to any interested. It gives such perspective to these films these days, filled with exposition and mindless, senseless drivel poured into the dialogue as if it's necessary, when there are films with no dialogue that still manage to tell their stories perfectly. Number 24, Candy Corn. Could that title sound more fitting of Halloween? Seriously. A 2019 American horror film written and directed by Josh Hasty. In it, on Halloween Eve, local outcast Jacob Atkins is carelessly murdered. Wait, is there a way to kill someone with care? How do you murder someone with care? Isn't it all carelessly? You're murdering someone. Anyway, a vagabond carny named Dr. Death takes matters into his own hands, bringing Jacob back from the dead to creatively seek brutal revenge on his killers. Seriously, carelessly murdering? Really? Okay. That's gonna bug me. The traditional tale of dumb bullies picking on and killing the local freak, and the local freak returning for revenge. The fun part is the Halloween setting. I didn't enjoy the revenge aspect as much because the revenge is orchestrated by someone who has nothing to gain from it and takes too much pleasure in it. I like the idea of freaks defending their own, but I think that message was lost. I think the death I enjoyed the most was the girl. She dies having her tongue ripped out, which was the most fitting. She knew the guys planned to prank someone who didn't deserve it and didn't stop them. She watched them beat him and said nothing. She watched them kill him and tried to act moral, but didn't stop her from just accepting fake platitudes and spending the rest of the film trying to shag her boyfriend. A boy was murdered and she tried to act the most innocent, but she was just as much to blame. The others were monsters who acted like it. In a way, she was the worst. Number 25, The Car, a 1977 American horror film directed by Elliot Silverstein and written by Michael Butler, Dennis Chirac, and Lane Slate, from a story by Butler and Chirac. It tells the story of an unmanned, self-driving, mysterious car which goes on a murderous rampage, terrorizing the residents of a small town. It's weird that this film makes me think of Jaws. In a way, it kinda has the same elements and follows similar plot structure. I don't hate the film, I think it's well made despite people saying otherwise, and even like how the front of the car looks like a face. The thing is, I don't get it, and the film never explains itself. Sometimes you don't need an explanation, but even Christine gave you one. Okay, not really, but it threw enough stuff at you that you accepted it as an explanation. This doesn't really try. We're just meant to accept this is a demonic car that has come from the depths of hell to roam around killing people one day for no reason at all. I know for most films I'm pretty easy, but come on, give me more than that. Outside the car itself, I did actually like the characters, and props to the film for not being afraid to kill characters the audience would like and wouldn't want to see killed. Most films don't take those risks. Number 26, The Car, Road to Revenge, a 2019 action horror film directed by G.J. Camp, with a screenplay by Camp, Michael Tabb, and Matt Yamishita, from a story by Tabb. It's the sequel to the 1977 film, and in it, an unscrupulous district attorney is savagely murdered and tossed out of a building onto his brand new car. Mysteriously, the district attorney and his car come back to life as a single being with a thirst for vengeance. So this is set in a dystopian future. This film is part Mad Max Fury Road, part Blade Runner, part The Car, and part any film about domestic violence. It's fucking nuts and just an overall dumb sequel. I mean, any of these concepts individually is fine, but throwing them all together just had me in a constant state of what the fuck am I even watching? While the plot is positively horrendous, at least the performances were good and the quality of the film was good too, just not an enjoyable story. Number 27, Cheerleader Camp, originally titled Bloody Pom Poms! I like that title better. A 1988 American slasher film directed by John Quinn in his directorial debut and written by David Lee Fane and R.L. O'Keefe. The film follows a troubled young woman who arrives at a cheerleader summer camp for a competition where a series of murders begin to occur. Traditional 80s slasher all the way to the core. Campy exterior, no pun intended, with gruesome deaths scattered about. I honestly couldn't ask for much more in an 80s horror film, and all with the traditional waiting till the end to reveal the killer, but ha! I guessed the killer right away, though I got the why wrong, I at least got the who right. I was floored to see Lucinda Dickey in this. I haven't seen her in anything aside from Breakin' 1 and 2, so that was a delight. Just 2 years before she retired from acting. Such a shame. She should have done more horror, and so did her. Number 28, Cheerleader Camp to the Death. A 2014 American horror film directed by Dustin Ferguson and written by John Cleese and Christian Sellers, and is a sequel to the 1988 film. In and after a team of cheerleaders are burned to death in a gruesome sprinkler accident, the one who got away, Tanya, returns to the cheerleader camp when someone in a panda costume begins killing one girl every hour. It's up to Tanya to piece together the clues before time runs out. I'll give you government codes, I'll tell you where the buried treasure is, just please don't make me watch this again. That was horrifically brutal. I didn't guess the who because the who and why was so random and made no sense. I know this is low budget, but my god. 60% of scenes where someone is talking, everybody has their backs to the camera, so we can't see what they're saying. Or the person who is speaking is completely off screen. That and the dialogue was some of the most cringe-worthy script work I've ever heard in my life. Number 29, Chernobyl Diaries, a 2012 American disaster horror film directed by Brad Parker and with a screenplay by Oren Peli, Carrie Van Dyke, and Shane Van Dyke, from a story by Peli. In it, 6 tourists hire an extreme tour guide who takes them to the abandoned city of Pripyat, the former home to the workers of the Chernobyl nuclear reactor. During their exploration, they soon discover they are not alone. Well, this was the perfect film to help me fall straight to sleep. But then when I tried to finish it, when I woke up, it continued to make me want to fall asleep. When dealing with the subject of Chernobyl, there are so many creative avenues someone could have taken for the subject of a horror film, and I'm pretty disappointed it went for the most obvious one and didn't even really add anything to it, so that perhaps it was fresh or unexpected in some way. Could have done something along the lines of what they did for the start of 2014's Godzilla. It was about as predictable as it could get. It wasn't worth the time I dedicated to it. Plus, I have a disdain for films that predominantly take place in the dark and just have people running around with a flashlight or no light at all. I can't be scared or even care about anything happening when I can't see a goddamn thing that's supposed to be happening. And the last film in this recap is number 30, Children of the Corn, Runaway, a 2018 horror film directed by John Gallagher and written by Joel Soisson. It's the 10th film in the Children of the Corn film series and a sequel to 2011's Children of the Corn Genesis. In it, a young pregnant Ruth, who escaped a murderous child cult in a small Midwestern town, spends the next decade living anonymously in an attempt to spare her son the horrors that she experienced as a child. She lands in the small Oklahoma town, but something is following her. Now she must confront the evil or lose her child. 1 hour and 22 minutes of absolutely nothing. Less than nothing even. It looks like maybe there's a storyline, but there really isn't, and the conclusion just has you scratching your head like, how did we get here? And what was the point of all this? It's just a bunch of nonsense. I don't know why we needed yet another of these films. They don't achieve anything. They just exist. I mean, I guess at least they're giving people jobs, but they're not entertaining because there's never really consistent storylines or interesting characters to invest in. At least the acting was good and it was well filmed, but that's all I can say really. Whew! And that is my first 31 Days of Halloween movie recap. Yeah, that was so much longer than I expected. I would probably cut this recap down into smaller videos, but that would mean I have to make more of them, and I just can't dedicate that kind of time when I'm trying to watch 206 movies in 31 days. I'm gonna go insane. So anyway, if you have seen or heard of any of the films that I have mentioned in this video, please comment down below and share your thoughts on them. If there are some that you haven't heard of and they've piqued your interest, comment down below and tell me what those were. And if you have any questions about any of these movies, please feel free to ask. I would be happy to answer any questions if you have. Anyway, I have to go. I have more movies to watch, so I will see you in my next Spooktober video. I hope everybody is having a great October and you're all taking care of each other. As always, thank you to my amazing patrons for supporting me. I'm sorry there isn't really any content for October. You know I'm busy, but I gave you all my October content early, so I hope that gives me a pass. But anyway, I'm out, so until then, bye guys!